almost every single campaign on Kickstarter, at least in our categories, tends to go through the doldrums, which is what I call the death march. So once you get past that first 40, 72 hours, it's just slows down to a crawl and people panic, but they shouldn't be, because that's just a natural way in which Kickstarter tends to work.
You, Alex Shvartsman, are an author who has authored over 60 short stories that have been published, probably more at this point. And the thing I want to talk to you about is Kickstarter. And from what I've seen, you've run 14 successful Kickstarters yourself that have made anywhere from $1,000 to $15,000. And you just mentioned that you have done consulting on many other Kickstarting projects. So could you give us a brief intro on who you are and what you write?
Sure. So I am a science fiction and fantasy author. I have several novels out, as well as over 120 short stories published, which I should really update that bio, I suppose. I've also edited over a dozen anthologies, and many of those have been launched through Kickstarter, because anthologies are very difficult to sell to traditional publishers. So it's more of a proof of concept thing, and Kickstarter is absolutely a perfect platform for them, because now you have not just yourself, but a group of authors highly motivated to promote the project and help you make sure that it reaches its funding in terms of getting the word out. I've also worked on as a consultant and just as a providing information on a variety of campaigns in publishing and in gaming industries. So I've helped raise well over $2 million on Kickstarter.
Oh, so you are also in gaming too?
Yes.
Oh, that's so awesome. I mean, there's so many cool video games and board games and everything, and books, of course, on Kickstarter. And you just mentioned like proof of concept. Do you see a lot of authors that are running Kickstarters just to see if they have a good book and the audience there for that book?
Well, that should always be a consideration. You absolutely do need to research ahead of time and kind of make triple sure that that you think that there's going to be an audience for your book, because you do have to, there's a lot of upfront work, and there are some upfront costs if you're going to do it right. So even if the campaign fails, you're going to be on the hook for a few $1,000s if you're doing it right. So it's a good idea to make sure that what you're doing is something that you think will appeal to a fairly sizable chunk of people. Having said that, that sizable chunk of people could be a few hundred, or it could be a few thousand or more, and you really, really want to figure out which. So the Kickstarter is a great way to estimate what sort of live sales you can expect in the future. For example, for books where we do an offset print run, which means that we print the book in advance instead of printing them one at a time, print on demand. Kickstarter is usually a great way to help estimate the size of that print run, because we can pretty much take whatever we sell on Kickstarter and multiply it by 10, and that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
Nice, and not just putting money into a Kickstarter, but your time. If it doesn't work, obviously it's a learning experience, but that's taking up your valuable time too. So why did you decide to launch books via Kickstarter?
So the very first book that I launched on Kickstarter was an anthology called Unidentified Funny Objects. And it was an anthology of humorous science fiction and fantasy stories. It was not really a themed anthology. It wasn't like every single story is going to be about cats, or every single story is going to be like a space opera adventure. It was more of a theme thing. I firmly believe that there is demand among readers for more humor and more short story humor. But I also didn't have experience as an editor at that point. I was already a published author, but I've never edited an anthology. And so getting a traditional publisher to throw $10,000, $20,000 at me in order to let me do this anthology would have been a reach without really great contacts. So being able to raise the funds directly from readers who are interested in this project not only proved the concept, but also allowed me to do a lot of cool stuff, like pay people very competitive rates, get some really big names involved. And not only did the book do well, but it did well enough to spur a series. We now have 9 volumes in that series, and each and every one of them was paid through at least a large chunk of which one was paid by funds raised on Kickstarter. So typically we will raise anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 per book, and that's enough to pay authors 10 cents per word, which is very competitive rate for short fiction at this time, but also to pay professional rates to the artists, to other people involved in the project, design people, layout people, etc. Which is something that a lot of small publishers who don't have the good budget are forced to cut corners on. And we don't want to cut corners. We want the book to look as gorgeous as anything that a major New York publisher will be able to put out. So had it not been for Kickstarter, I probably would not have risked, like a 4-digit number on throwing out my own money at this anthology, at least not at the very first one. So it literally launched my career as an editor. And like I said, at this point, I've edited over 15 different anthologies for various publishers, including some pretty big ones. But it also launched the series that people love. And at this point, I think we've sold between the entire series, probably sold about 200,000 copies of the UFO books. And the series is going strong, even though we're doing nothing to promote it. We're not paying for advertising. It's just chugging along on the strength of, like people discovering it and telling each other about it, etc. So we're probably going to do the next one next year. It used to be an annual series, and I got really busy with other projects. So now it's more like once every couple of years.
Wow, it's crazy that, I mean, and without Kickstarter, that probably wouldn't have happened, would it?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is why a proof of concept thing is so important, because you can invest a little bit of money, because you absolutely do need to have a cover ahead of time. People want to see the cover and not just like you tell them, oh, we're going to get a great cover if we fund. They need to see that in advance. You need to get some marketing assets. You need to get a lot of legwork done, so a lot of your personal time. But then once you have those things, you can actually then be ambitious and raise the kind of money that you need to do the project right.
And speaking of legwork, what are some of the main things that authors should do pre-launch leading up to their Kickstarter campaign?
Well, the greatest asset that you have is your reach. It could be your mailing list. It could be people who follow your website. It could be people who interact with you on social media. You have to have sizable footprints in some of those areas, not necessarily all of them. Like, for example, I'm not on TikTok, and I'm pretty much hardly never on Instagram. So those are two really good and big like promotional channels that I probably should be on, but none of us can do everything. But you have to have some channels that work for you. For some people, it could be a mailing list that has like 10,000 people. For others, it's a very large platform on X or Blue Sky or somewhere else. For me, it's primarily Facebook. Like, Facebook is my best social media platform, and I get a ton of engagement on there. So that's a really good way for me to get the word out. But of course, I also will go on podcasts and radio and anywhere that will have me and talk about the upcoming project as well. So just getting that word out is the hardest part. You need to not only have that reach yourself, but you also need to be pretty sure that you have at least a few other people with significant social media followings or other footprints that will be willing to share your project as well, because that's the way that people find out about it. You can't buy that advertising. You can't just throw money at Facebook and buy Facebook ads. Doesn't really work. Can't really buy Amazon ads for this because it's not on Amazon. Really getting the organic social media and and direct marketing word out, perfect. And if it's not your first campaign, then the most valuable tool you have are the backers that pledged for your previous campaign. That the update email or the update message through Kickstarter on a previous successful campaign where you've delivered on time and hopefully everybody left satisfied is by far your best marketing tool.
Yeah, that's one thing. Talking to another Kickstarter consultant and creator, who was like, it's a way to grow. Like, even if you have a very small goal, your first initial Kickstarter campaign is whatever, $1,000. Successfully fund that, then you have those backers for those updates and possibly on your email list.
Yeah. And I know it's been a trend lately to do very small campaigns and just sort of try to go like, I funded in 30 minutes. Now let's do stretch goals. My philosophy is completely different. I like to be ambitious with my goals. I would rather set the goal to the amount that I need to do the project right and kind of really push the supporters to get the word out, especially toward the end of the campaign, because most of these campaigns tend to fund unless you're doing like the really, really easy kind of like, very low initial goal. The campaigns that have a real goal tend to fund in the last hours or the last couple of days of the campaign, and it really pushes your supporters to help get the word out and to energizes them, gets them to help work with you, and that's a lot more effective, I feel, than the complacency that comes with like, oh, we're at 600%, but that 600% is $600.
Yeah.
I would much rather set the goal. I think the lowest campaign that I did was like maybe like $2,500 or $3,000, and that
Okay.
was for something that was like super easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that what percent of effort do you think needs to go into the pre-launch compared to after your campaign launches? Would you say you need to put more effort into getting everybody hyped up and letting them know, or was it 50-50? What do you think?
Well, you're spending a lot of time and effort pre-launch, just creating all of your assets, building your campaign, making sure you have beautiful images, you have text that will hopefully, appeal to the people that you're trying to get to back your campaign. So you're doing a lot of legwork like that. You're also creating promotional materials. People love swag, so you got to figure out: are you making postcards? Are you making pins? Are you making buttons? Are you making stickers? Like, what are the promotional items, and how are you utilizing them? All of that, of course, happens before the campaign launches. So once the campaign does launch, uh, the crucial time is really the first 48 hours. You really have to kind of like clear your schedule, and that's what you're going to be doing those 2 days. Go just everywhere you can, because the more aggressively you can like launch out the gate, the more you're going to potentially pick up throughout the campaign. But then you do almost every single campaign on Kickstarter, at least in our categories, tends to go through the doldrums, which is what I call the death march. So once you get past that first 40, 72 hours, it's just slows down to a crawl, and people panic, but they shouldn't be, because that's just a natural way in which Kickstarter tends to work. People tend to either back right away, or they tend to mark the campaign and back at the very, very end of it. So they will come back to it and see, oh, how's it doing? Is this likely to fund? Oh, it looks like it's not too far away. Maybe I'll throw some money at it. So you tend to get something like 70+% of your funding and your activity in the first couple of days and in the last couple of days. And everything in between in this huge mentally draining slog, because you're sitting there and you go like, I got one backer in my campaign today. This is terrible. But it's not terrible, because people are still viewing it. You're still getting the word out there. And if you look at the number of people that is watching your campaign, which is something that's available in the Kickstarter dashboard, that number tends to tick up slowly as the campaign goes by. And many of those people will come back at the end and consider pledging at least. So you have to kind of craft your message right, make sure that they still feel like they're helping, and that they still feel like they're making a difference, and that they still want the product.
That makes sense. Like, you have that urgency at the end. Plus, I mean, not all campaigns fund, so they're also thinking, well, this might not even fund especially at the beginning, which is kind of eye-opening. I didn't really think about that. I want to touch on the swag that you mentioned. So swag and rewards. How do you approach your rewards with Kickstarter?
So the most important reward is the project that you're making, right? Like, I mean, if it's a book, that is the key reward. That is what everybody's going to want. But you also have multiple versions of it that you can offer. So if you're doing a book, you're going to have an ebook, which is like the most basic thing. And the great thing about an ebook is that beyond your creation of the product, there's no additional costs. You're not shipping it, you're not storing it, you're not like printing it. You just send somebody a digital file, which costs nothing. So it's awesome when people give you money for the ebook, because it's 100% money that goes toward your fixed costs. Then you have a paperback. Then you have a signed paperback, which is essentially, most of us who do Kickstarters are not at the point where our signatures are necessarily valuable, but it's an excuse for backers to say, well, hey, a signed book will give me an excuse to throw an extra $5 at this campaign, basically. So, and people absolutely do that personal experience. Then the next step, of course, is a hardcover book. So, that's another higher tier item, and you can do everything from like a very basic hardcover, which you could price at like $25 or $30, all the way to something with sprayed pages and like leather, cover and all, into hundreds of dollars, which is tough. I mean, like it's something that you should really only do if you have a fairly sizable campaign, I think. But sky is the limit. Beside that, you always want to hit $10, $20, and $25. Those are the three most popular reward amounts on Kickstarter. And you definitely have to have very attractive rewards that you want people to go for at those numbers. I mean, you should absolutely feel free to have other rewards and add-ons and all sorts of different things, because optimally you want somebody to have lots of choices and be excited to like throw in a few extra bucks to get something exclusive and unique. But those are the numbers you're going to see the most. And so absolutely make sure that you know your paperback should be 20 bucks. If you're going to do $25, offer something in there, throw in a pin, throw in a signature, throw in something, and your ebook should be $10. Those really are pretty standard things that work for most campaigns across the publishing field, unless you're doing something wildly different from everybody else.
Is there anything that you say don't do this reward, or that you've seen in the past was like, yeah, this reward just doesn't work?
So the worst thing, in my opinion, that you can do is offer T-shirts or anything else that requires different sizing, because it becomes a nightmare. You can't order them in bulk, right? Because when I do a pin, when I do an animal pin, I can order 100 pins, 200 pins, whatever it is, and they're exactly the same, and it's just a matter of how many. So if I need to estimate my costs, I'm just going to assume that it's going to be the smallest possible amount, which is 100, and I know what it costs me per pin when I order 100 of them. So I could price my rewards based on that, and if I happen to move more than 100 of them, then my per unit cost goes down, and my campaign becomes more successful because of that. But with T-shirts or with anything that needs to be personalized, something unique needs to happen. All of a sudden you're like, well, yeah, I sold 37 T-shirts, but they're across 6 different sizes and like 2 different colors and 2 different styles, and it becomes such a pain. Another thing you should probably avoid is anything that's easily breakable. So things like mugs or glasses. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm also not a big fan of large prints. Like I would much rather do postcards, because a postcard is something you can safely put inside of the book, and it'll be arrive to your backer safely. But if you do a larger poster, shipping it in a manner that'll keep it secure and not bent and damaged is going to be so much extra effort that it may not be the best use of your time and of the resources of your campaign.
That makes a lot of sense. More customization, more time and effort spent on your part. Totally. Well, let's wrap this up before we get too far into it. I did want to ask, what have you learned based on your past campaigns and working with our campaigns, that maybe some mistakes that you made or anything along those lines that you changed as you did more campaigns?
One of the things is not to be ashamed to promote the campaign. People are always kind of, well, I don't want to spam all my friends constantly with messages and posts and updates about my campaign. But you're not asking for charity. You're offering a product, and it's a product that presumably you're proud of, or you shouldn't be doing it. And so you should not be afraid to just shout at the world and say, look, I'm making this thing. You're going to want it. And the best possible way for you to order it is do it through Kickstarter, because that way I'm not giving 50% or 70% to Amazon, and I'm not giving a large chunk of it to a bookstore or some other supply chain place. That way more of the money goes directly toward creating the thing, and you're actually helping me do it. So don't be afraid to get out in front of people and to tell everybody. Create postcards, little business cards that don't have your personal information, just have the campaign. Hand them out to people that, when you walk your dog and you engage with them about something. Hand them out to somebody you start talking to at the library, at the supermarket. Don't be like afraid to promote yourself.
Yeah, I think that's one thing a lot of authors in general, not just with Kickstarter, have that problem. But I think what they don't realize is that most people think it's awesome what you're doing, these books that you're putting out. Most people aren't putting out these books. So when they see a friend that publishes a book, they're excited for them.
If we were extroverts, most of us probably wouldn't be writers. So we have to work hard at it. So there are extrovert writers, absolutely, and I envy them. But for the rest of us, yeah, I mean, that's why having something that you can actually hand to a person especially. So what I do is I have business cards, and the front of the business card is always my book cover, because it's already in the shape and size of the business card anyway. And on the back it has some information in the book about the book or my website or whatever. And you always have those. So if you ever get into a conversation with someone and say, hey, I'm a writer, and like, oh, what kind of stuff do you write? Right there, boom, you have a business card, you hand it to them, say, you can check this out. It's on Amazon, bookstores, wherever your stuff happens to be. And the same is true with Kickstarter as well. You can say, hey, I have a new project that's on Kickstarter. It's only going to be on there for another 2 weeks. So blink and you've missed it.
Yeah,
And
right.
create that sense of urgency, and direct them to go there, and like common, look for opportunities, like speak at a local library, speak at a local science fiction convention. There's lots of small science fiction conventions that are welcoming of independent authors, of newer authors. They may not get the guest of honor slot, they may not get a ton of panels, but they might invite you to speak on a panel or do a signing. That's a great way to connect with potential readers. So just look for those opportunities, and don't just kind of rely on, hey, if I upload this book onto Amazon, people will buy it, because it doesn't work that way. There are millions upon millions of books on Amazon, and you need to help people find yours.
That's so true, and I think that's perfect advice to end this conversation on. But I'm curious, where can people find you? Are you still doing consulting if authors are looking for help out there?
So I don't do commercial consulting. I mostly do this for my friends. However, I also am very happy if somebody has a specific question and they're stumped, and they message me through my website, I will always respond. So I can help them out real quick, or point them towards somebody if they really need to hire a person. I can point them toward other people that are willing to do that sort of thing for money. And my website is really simple. It's my name, which is on the screen, alexshvartsman.com. And it has all of my upcoming information, my books and short stories that are out now. Of course, the current Kickstarter campaign information as well, and all the conventions where people can come and see me in person.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link your links in the description of this video, and we'll link to your Kickstarter page so authors can see what a good Kickstarter campaign looks like. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on and chatting about Kickstarter. This is awesome. So glad to connect with you. And hopefully in the future, maybe we can do this again.
Sounds great. Thank you very much for having me.